Broken windshields are very common, especially the newly replaced ones. I've had a lot of experience, unfortunately, and I'm going to share what I've learned. It's a lot of work. It can be done. The real process of changing the windshield is all about accepting the difficulties and working your way through them. There's a systematic way to change it. I've got to change mine. I'm going to make a video highlighting the challenges and the steps involved. If you take them one step at a time and work your way through it, it's very doable. It is a Zen patience thing. You cannot be in a hurry, and you cannot expect to drive the car in the next couple of days. Acceptance is the key to getting this done. So, this is what has to be done. The windshield has A-pillar supports and extruded aluminum bottom and top pieces that are bolted together and bolted into the car to provide a somewhat of a roll bar. The windshield is a stressed member. It is designed for your safety. It's installed within the frame. The challenges of this convertible are that the windshield frame has to seal against the car body's paint line. The top of the car has to seal against the top of the window frame. The quarter lights, or as we say in the US, wing windows, have a seal that must seal here. If the angle of the windshield is changed, the quarter light gap will increase or decrease. If you're restoring a car, ensure that you put the windshield in first. Then put the quarter lights in and adjust them to the angle of the windshield to get the correct gap, and then follow that up with the side windows and making sure that they're tilted to match the quarter light. So it's a system of progression of adjustment. If you're taking the windshield out of a car and putting it back in the car, you may still have to make this adjustment. As my seals are new, and I've been down this road before, most likely I will not have to adjust my door, but I'm not going to just put this window in and slam the door shut in hopes that this is going to be correct. I'm going to check it very carefully as I close that door for the first time. Now, the process of changing the window is to unbolt the frame, which bolts into the body of the car on both sides, and there's some support in the center, and lift the entire frame out, bring it inside, put it on a table, and change the glass within the frame. After it's changed, I'll bring it back, reintroduce it to the car, and bolt it in. It's a little harder than that, but we'll get into details. In order to get the frame out, the two bolts are behind the dash here, and the other one's a little further back. I have heard some cars it is possible to remove the bolts and reinstall them with the dash in place. It certainly is not in mine. In order to remove the dash, you have to make clearance to lay on the floor upside down, reach up around, and get to the bolts that are on the top edge of the dash. Now, in order to make room to get your body on the floor upside down, you've got to get these seats out. Both seats need to come out. It's just part of the acceptance. You just do each step one at a time and it gets done. I take the steering wheel off and the escutcheon that goes around the stocks. Now, it may be possible to not take those off, but it's not worth the bother for me. It's easier to just take the wheel off. And also, to take the dash off, I need to remove the console and the control center console to make room. Those are much easier. Then I can get all these bolts across the top. There's usually a cover underneath the footwells, and there's some bolts underneath the footwells. They'll have to come out. Then the back of the heater controls on both sides on this year will have to come out. Later years, the heaters are down in this control panel down below. Then you have to get the speedometer cable off from the back. You can sometimes you can pull the dash out a little bit and then work on it, but I've been able to do it with my hands. I usually get some scratches with the dash in place. There's a bunch of electrical connectors that must be removed underneath the dash. Then when the dash is pulled out some, or maybe even before, in my case I have the oil gauge in the middle. There's an oil line that has to be cracked and removed. Oil won't flow out of that. I would just get a rag. There's probably going to be a couple drops. Oil goes back down toward the motor usually. Then we'll get back to the video. When that's done, I'll try to make a time lapse on some of this so you can see how that goes. Taking out the windshield frame, including the seats, the dash, and all the other things. If you're familiar with your car and you've been into it before, I'm familiar with mine, so I can have the dash out in about 3.5 hours. Then changing the glass, it all has to come apart and be cleaned up. If it's freshly restored, it'll be easy to take apart and clean up. If it's been in service for quite a while, expect to spend quite a long time cleaning the window frame. Now, word of advice: the facing of the windshield has a surface finish that, unless you're planning to replace the finish or sand and buff it completely, don't disturb it. It's extremely hard to get this, I suppose it's a type of anodization, off and down to the raw aluminum. Once you start down that road, you're looking at easily days to a week of polishing to get a nice finish. Because it's not shiny, it actually looks better stock. If you were to shine it up like a mirror, it would probably look awkward for the car, and it's certainly not original. If it's badly pitted and there's no other choice to clean it up, then we will probably end up sanding it and maybe re-anodizing it or just polishing it like many people do. So be careful not to change that. Also, underneath the pillars in the corner on the A pillar, I cleaned mine up and then I decided I was going to clean it up and polish it. It looked terrible. I subsequently roughed it back up and tried to make it back to the original appearance. Inside the car while you're driving, shiny things are actually very annoying. So reduce glare, don't polish surfaces, minimize the shiny bits. There's already enough in this car. It'll make your driving experience better. Like this steering wheel, I would have rather had a black center if I could have gotten it, because when the sun's wrong, it's in your eyes. From this point, we have the shifter boot, the seats, the console out. We have the steering wheel off, the escutcheons that go around the control stalks off. I've taken this piece loose, but I did not remove it completely because of all the wires in there. All I need is a little bit of clearance so I can drop the dashboard and get it out of here. It's possible maybe to leave this in, but I think it'll restrict my ability to get to the heater defrost control cable and the odometer reset, the speedometer drive nut. These are all very difficult accesses to make, and there's this side of plastic kind of gets in the hole that you have to reach your hand into. From this point, to get the dashboard off, that's what we've got to do. We've got a couple bolts on the bottom of the dash to remove. We've got to disconnect speedometer, odometer, the trip odometer, nut. We've got to disconnect the trip odometer control down here, the speedometer drive cable. This is somewhat optional. Some cars it may be easier to just get the dash out a little bit and get it from the top. The oil line, I always get the dash loose and then remove from the top. There's a lot of electrical connectors under here that have to be disconnected. Be careful to pull on just the connectors, not the wires. And then the most difficult part, there's a string of little nuts and washers along the top here. One of them is completely hidden by the glove box shell. Removing the glove box shell is quite a process. There's screws down here for the hinges for the door. There's screws in the sides. There's screws in the top, and you'll need a bit with a little wrench probably, or at least at minimum a stubby to get those out, to get to the one up here. Last time I put it together, I put the glove box in and I left this one out, so I'm not going to have to remove the glove box shell. So it begins. In order to put the hardware on the studs that go down from the dash into the body of the car, you need to be able to hold the flat washer up under the dash on the stud, and then introduce the flat washer, so I can't even do it right side up, and hold it up under the dash. Then put the nut on the bottom of the flat washer and the lock washer, and then bring the socket set up and put it on all that without dropping it. Repeated droppings have led me to understand that you can take the washer, drop it into a little bit shorter socket, put the lock washer over the nut and the flat washer over the lock washer, hold them together outside before you put it in the car. Take a piece of tape and while holding these together, put the tape over the edge of the socket and just the very edge of the lock washer. This is a big time speed trick. This gives you the flat washer, the lock washer, and the nut all in a kit that can be put up. Now you want to tape all your hardware together and onto your extension, so it just has enough room to bend on the, this is a wobbly extension and a universal joint, so that when you get it up there you can arrange it such that you can get it straight, twirl it, and still be able to twirl it up and get it started, if not run in. Then when you give it a yank, the hardware will pull out of the tape and be left under the dash, where and with this arrangement you don't even have to get your hand up in there. You can just push this up in there, start it, and then give it a yank and pull it out. It's also very, very effective when doing the, and I'm just aiming this camera blindly, when doing the bolts that go in from the back on the little trim rail that goes on the body of the car. These bolts do the same thing. They're very hard to get at. These nuts are really quite brutal on these studs, and you'll have to do the same thing with that. Tape the hardware together, introduce the hardware to the stud, and spin it in. At this point, I believe I've removed all the hardware necessary to get the dash off in the frame of the car. I've got the heaters disconnected, the electrical disconnected, the speedometer disconnected, the odometer reset, triple reset disconnected, the ducts are out, the nuts and washers are off. This one I never installed when I originally put it together. Off of this stud going down into the body, this one, and that one. I should be able to pull the bottom of the dash away to clear the lower mounts, the three here, here, and here, and be able to lift the dash off of the top of the body. And then I'll have to stop and remove the oil line. The dash is out. The tricky parts of this dash are these studs. These are the studs I was mentioning before. They go all the way around the top. The other three mounts are this, here, well, here, there's lower mounts. Oh, I guess it would be this one, and this one, that hold the bottom of the dash onto the car. These connections, these traps that hold the casing of the heater control and the defroster control are difficult to get out from the bottom, but you got to do it. This is the oil line, the trip reset. Again, this is 75. The other cars are either a lot simpler or I don't know, maybe even harder. All this preparatory work up to this point is now about to pay off. We can get to the bolts here and here that go into the side of the car that connect the A-pillar and window frame to the car itself. Once these bolts on both sides and these two bolts up here are out, we can lift the windshield frame off the car so that we can disassemble it, and get the broken glass out, get the new glass in, and that really is the only way. So, we shall begin. Start removal by loosening these up here so that the seal can unload more naturally. When the side bolts come out, they come out all at once, and that would put undue pressure on the center bolt, so we'll just take it off first. Now I'm going to speed it up. When I get these two bolts up to the point where they're about to rub on the metal frame, I'll stop and I'll go ahead and pull these 4 bolts out. We'll just do that. Now that we have the 4 bolts on the left and right side out, and the 2 bolts out of the top, these will take some time, be patient. We can open the doors slightly, grab the windshield frame, roll it up, and out of the car. Now would be a good time to consider cleaning up these vents, replacing this vinyl along the dash, cleaning any sealer that happens to be on the car that needs to be cleaned. There's a lot of things you can do at this time. This is the right time to go through all the wiring and things under the dash and reconsider how they're installed, how they're tied back, if they need to be replaced. I know you started this video with the idea of just doing one job, but with all that work to get under the dash, it's probably okay to spend an extra couple days working on some other things too. Spending the time, you'll love the car more. The screws in the corners have an access restriction, and these pieces are in the way for any normal screwdriver. Had it be a normal screwdriver. This is a Torx. Most stores do not have Torx screwdrivers. They're different. They have a little ridge along the edge of the screw and on the sides of the screw heads themselves. In order to get these out, I use a bit stuffed in the corner and a little wrench to turn them out. It's very difficult, but using a Phillips or a cross point tip in these will eventually round them out. Because these are probably rusted in, you're going to need all the mechanical advantage you can get, and that's where Torx really helps. They are actually superior to Phillips or cross point. But get a set of Torx bits, maybe get 2 sets, and they're used throughout the car. I'll go ahead and speed this up and get the rest of them out. Now your windshield probably won't come apart as easily as this one. It's been apart recently. Unfortunately, I didn't do well with the first piece of glass. So, now that all the screws in the top are out and the bottom are out, I'm going to go ahead and push these A-pillars out the side and pull the top and bottom off to seal. Sometimes, most times, it's probably better to squirt, I just use Armor all the way around the edge so that it'll be loose and it'll come off easily. This one's not been in very long, so I'm just going to push it off. It'll probably come right off. These are the little metal elbows. They're screwed into the back here and come out that engage these screws. The top piece screws on a plate on the top edge of this. These seals are cheap, and if it's old at all, replace it. It's only like $20-some, and if this one wasn't near brand new, I would absolutely replace it every time. But by the time I'm done, it'll be basically clean and new looking. That's a top piece. It's got a bend to it. That bend allows it to see if I get the short end goes inside of here, the long end goes outside of there. You can match up the screws. There's a twist this way to it to match this piece, and then this offset allows the side pieces to go together. It makes it stronger. You'll see how it works when you take it apart. This piece of glass has fine little chips along the edge of the glass, and it is the best of the ones I have bought. I have found that these chips are the cause, or I believe they are the cause, of a lot of window breaking. In order to stop the chipping, I'm going to employ wet sanding with a random orbit sander with multiple grades. I'm going to start with a heavy grade and work my way down to a fine grade, keeping it wet with a hose to try to polish the edge until it has a nice ground finish with a very fine grit size. Each little chip is considered a stress riser. It's actually the beginning of a break. With the chips removed, it will remove the seeds of the start of the next of a broken window, and it'll allow the window to do a lot more bending with thermal and mechanical stresses before it should give way. Okay, now I've got the glass edges ground nice and smooth. I've got a good seal. I've got all the other metal pieces cleaned up. I know all the screws will go in. I know that the metal fasteners are fine. I've got everything ready to go to start putting this back together again. So everybody has their own opinion about this. Many people, I think the original intent was just to put the seal in dry, shove it on the glass, push it all the way around, and put the top and bottom together, and then put the sides on, the little supporting rod, and all the screws. After driving it in the rain, I found big puddles pile up on, this is the bottom corners, on the bottom corners where the A-pillar comes down, there's a hollow, and it floods in there, and floods around the seal, or over or under it, and down the dash. So I use sealer, but most sealers dry too fast, and that makes you have to hurry the whole process through, which is very frustrating and fraught with problems. For one, we don't want the sealer to push against the glass, and we don't want it to dry too quickly before we get a chance to put it together. Also, if you should have to take it apart again, most sealers are too hard to take apart. So I'm using the cheap, simple, old-fashioned mastic, which is not much more than tar. Ugly and nasty, but it always comes off, it always cleans up well, and it won't harden until long after the car's in service. The beauty of it is it stays fluid enough for the glass to find its own home in the seal, and the seal to find its home in the frame, and everything to settle and move around while it's being installed in the car, so that once installed, everything is in as natural a position as possible. So I'm going to put a little tiny bead of this mastic inside the seal and stick it on the glass, and then we'll move on from there. Okay, now I've got the seal on here, and it's got a little bit of sealer on the inside edge. We'll put a little bit of sealer on the top and bottom. The top's probably not a big leak problem, but the bottom is where I worry about the more. These A-pillars have a mount on the bottom that has to be securely fastened to the inside of the A-pillar. That will go inside the extrusion on the bottom. It has another piece. It's got a bend in it that bends down toward the center, and it bends in to take up the curve of the top extrusion. There's some medium length screws that go here, here, and here, and short screws go in the top here. It's very important to make sure the size of the screw is not too long. If the screw hits the glass or pressures it, it'll break it there. So I've got the two medium screws here. I'll use another medium here, and the two shorts go toward the center where the glass is going to be tight. So this is loose. I'm going to put in my sealer to fill the pocket. There's a gap here. This seal has cut back, presumably to avoid breaking, but I don't think it's very helpful because there's plenty of room there. There's actually creates a great void. It does provide a relief for this elbow bracket, but it can be a little bit on the large side. I'm going to go ahead and put plenty of sealer in there so that it'll take up that void. Again, don't use anything that'll dry quickly if you're going to use sealer, which I think you better if you're going to drive it in the rain. The frame's completely together now. I've got the screws in. Because I use sealer, I've got sealer squirting out all over. I'm going to take the rest of the bungee cords off, and this is the downside of the sealer. Clean up the sealer. Now, the seal itself may not go down flush to the frame. It's because there's a lot of room for motion around the glass. So I take my thumb and I push it down up against the frame on both sides. If the glass is the right shape, it'll be plenty down into the seal to continue to seal, but for aesthetic's sake it should be pushed down up against the glass. And it'll just go around like that, and I'll push it down, I'll get it all the way around, and I'll clean all of the mess up, and they'll do it over and over again until it's completely clean. And at that point, I'll be ready to start nursing this seal back into the track, which is tricky. It takes time and patience. And I'll put it up for the night. As you can see, since I started this, the sun's moved quite a long distance. Expect to spend some hours doing this. I don't try to do it quickly because if I did, I would probably break it or have more problems. Okay, now I've got the window completely cleaned 5 or 6 times. I put Rain-X on it. A lot of people don't like Rain-X because it's a silicone-based product, and if silicone gets on paint, it's a bugger to remove before you can do repaints. But since I would never not completely clean and sand paint before adding more paint, and I was able to put the Rain-X on the window inside away from the paint, I'm sure I'm not spilling any. I use sealer, like I said before, around the seal. This corner here, the water builds up on the outside of the car, and it can roll between these seals. This little seal here meshes with this seal, and the whole group gets squished onto the car body. So there's lots of little gaps in there. I put a little bit of my mastic, which is actually a roofing sealant, on there. There's probably a better way. A lot of people will find it and probably email me, and that's fine. I just found that the silicone sealers dry far too fast, and I wanted a lot of working time for everything to settle in. Now in the car, I put wax on here on the entire area where the seal is going to touch, let it dry, buffed it off, and did it 2 more times. So I got 3 coats, thick coats of wax all along this area where the bottom seal touches the paint and traps the edge of the vinyl. Now this vinyl is very hard to clean because of the angle of the windshield, so clean all this area or even replace this if you need to now. Also, these vents should be made to pass inspection now because it's easy to take them in and out now. Also, if you haven't done so already, adjust, retighten the sprayers and any other little hardware that's along the top. Before we put the dash in, you'll have time to work on the sprayers again, but there's a lot of things that are completely blocked from access. So now I'm going to grab the windshield and I'm going to put it on the car. Now that the windshield is on the car, there's a couple of really critical areas that will have to be dealt with. One is these 2 screws need to get started first. If you don't put them in and start working on them right away, you'll find that you'll have to pull the windshield back up to get them down into the holes. The second item is the seal folds in underneath the windshield and must be rolled back out all the way along the body in order to push the horns of the A-pillars down in and forward in the car. The seal is holding the window too far out, and until we roll it back, we'll not get it out. Now there's a couple ways to get that started. A plastic spatula can be inserted underneath to roll the seal. A paint stick works if you tape the end, but it's so easy to scratch the painted surfaces of the car. It's not a real good way. When you get it started, another thing I should have done, which would have been a great trick, is throw a piece of string. I'll probably go ahead and lift it up just a little bit and put a piece of cord under there. If you put a piece of cord under there, you can pull the cord out and it'll roll the seal with it. You can get enough traction on it, and once you get the seal started, you can turn it with your fingers all the way around. Here's a little trick I made up. Now you've got these 2 screws started, the frame most of the way into the body. The seal is folded up. I used a string to get the seal unrolled, and so I could pull it out. And I've got to get these 2 bolts on each side tightened down. But the first problem is getting them in. Because the seal wants to lift the windshield up, you're going to have to fight it to compress the seal. By putting these first down a little ways and pushing it to about the right location, I can use my tapered drift and get it into the spot where the bolt is a little, but that's not enough. You're going to need to move it a lot further. I've found this method works. Maybe you'll like it, maybe you'll find a better way, but this method works for me. What I do, a little primitive, is I go ahead and put a strap wrench on one side of the body over top of this. And I'm going to get a pad for that. Here's a rag. straighten it out, and strap the windshield frame and pull it down from door hinge to door hinge, pulling the bottoms I'll go ahead and try to get this off of this spot. I don't want the pressure there. I'll go ahead and loosen this up and move it to the lower door hinge so it'll have less potential for scratching. And that is the first bolt. Now, it didn't take a team of people, and it didn't take a lot of struggle. And the stress is across the A-pillar, the lower edge of the glass, close to the seal. It isolates the energy into as close to the seal and evenly as I can think of. To my mind, this works. I've used it before, it works. Now, I don't know that I'll get both screws in, but this could be a lot of work in most cases. And I'm not stressed out, so I must be working better than usual. Well, I have lost my socket. Okay, those are the first two bolts. Now, what this has done is got the back end in the car. But the back end is squished down, these bolts in, but the whole windshield is tipped down a lot. The reason being, these bolts aren't secure, and the rubber seal is fighting me. It's still pushing back. Now, I'm going to go back and flip the seal right side up again. I'll leave the strap in place for now because it helps to get the downward pressure where I need. And then when I get these tight and the seal flipped out, I'll show you the next trick. Now, this is a truly ugly arrangement. You probably won't like this, but I don't know a better way to do it. The problem is, you've got to force the windshield frame forward in order to tip it and get the bolts in the front of the arm down to the point where you can get this bolt in. Now, the the screw, there's one on the up in the corner you can barely see, about there, and there's one down there, and that screw is not exposed until the window frame is tipped far enough forward. And what I've found works, and I don't like it much, but it's the best I know of, is to push evenly on both sides of the windows and move the whole frame up as a unit, compressing the forward gasket down until the arm, which has got a hook on it, will tip down and expose the bolt. So this is the setup. On this side I've got a piece of wood, a bar, and a board. And another board on this side to distribute the stress evenly across the A-pillar, and a 4x4 hooked to a little board to keep from mucking up my carpet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to push down on one and push down on the other and push down on one and push down on the other and push down on one to push down the other until this is driven forward into the body and compresses the seal far enough that that bolt will be exposed. I've also taken the time to put, it's a little hard to see without going to macro, a little bit of a taper on the end of my bolt, with the idea that it'll start better, because the square-edged bolt is a lot harder. I have no idea how they did them in Abingdon. I'm sure somebody else knows. Please, if you have a better plan, email me. Better yet, make a video. I'll put alternative methods on my website. If you have a video posted on YouTube or anywhere else, let me know. If I'm allowed to publish the link, I'll link your ideas with my ideas, and we'll put them all together and let the person doing the work make the decision. Okay, now the seal is in, and the seal is quite compressed, but it's not completely compressed. It's got a good tight seal along there. I did have to loosen the windshield. When I got the seals in, I found they were still a little tight, so I went ahead and loosened the windshields, closed the doors, let them to try to naturalize the angles, and tightened it back down. On the driver's side, it was a bit loose. I had to actually grab the top of the windshield frame and give it a little bit of a pull back while I tightened the bolts and get the seal angle correct. For the most part, you can add and subtract a little bit with the windshield, but for the most part, there's door adjustments for that task. The whole window frame adjusts inside the door. That's another story.